So, this might be kind of close to the week of D&D horror stories and how to avoid them, but let's go ahead and talk about Persuasion. Now, Persuasion is a skill check in Dungeons & Dragons that basically kind of works as the way that your character is able to convince an NPC to do something. Follow them, give them information, help them in some sort of way, go the fuck away, whatever the case may be. Persuasion is something that is very heavily discussed within Dungeons & Dragons because some very bad DMs like to use Persuasion as a form of mind control. So today we're going to talk about how that kind of plays into everything and how you should actually be using Persuasion. So let's go ahead and jump right into it.
Riser, double.
I take how much damage? So, first off, let's talk about some of the horror stories that I've heard surrounding Persuasion. Everything from being able to basically get the king to deliver the crown directly to the bard, to survivors, fucking Dead by Daylight brain rot, to players thinking that because they rolled a nat 20 on Persuasion, they can just get the NPC to do whatever they want. I wish to fuck your wife. No, you can't do that. I rolled Persuasion, I hit a nat 20. Now I get to fuck the peasant's wife. No, you don't. Why would that be a thing? Persuasion is something that is often completely misused, and the biggest way that it is misused is actually dungeon masters using it on players or players using it on other players. One of the biggest problems that I have, at least when it comes to talking to other dungeon masters, is if I want something to happen, it's going to happen, and I'll figure out a way to do it. A very common horror story, and this happens most of the time, unfortunately, to femme and female players, but one of the biggest common issues is some dungeon masters will be like, I've got an NPC that's my self-insert, and he wants to fuck you, and the player's like, no, I would rather you not. And then the DM's like, well, it rolled 18 on Persuasion, so you have to give a wisdom saving throw, which is not how you do that, by the way. It's just a wisdom check, not a saving throw. Anyway, and so the player will roll because they don't know any better, unfortunately, and then they lose, and the DM's like, haha, now you're seduced. And that's like one of the worst examples, and unfortunately is an example that I've seen more than once, which is once too many. Right? I have seen multiple stories of dungeon masters rolling persuasion checks against their players, but furthermore, I saw a story one time where a group of players wanted to do a plan, and one of the players didn't want to be in the plan. So one of the players that was for the plan, let's say player A, player B. Player A is part of the group that wants to be for the plan. Player B is part of the group that doesn't want to go for the plan, which is only player B. Player A rolls Persuasion without the DM asking against Player B. Player B rolls Wisdom without the DM asking, and then they both look at the DM, and the DM's like, yeah, Player B has to do what Player A wants. That's not how that works. You are supposed to let your players roleplay it out, and if one player does not want to go with the plan that the rest of the players are going through, you as the dungeon master unfortunately have to be prepared to probably run 2 separate encounters, or player B is just going to have to sit out a session while the rest of the players go through with the plan. Is that harsh? Sure, but that's the result of not following the rest of your party. So stop using persuasions against players. But back to what we were talking about earlier, where we were talking about how players cannot get everything they want just because of successful persuasions. Persuasion is not mind control. Think of persuasion more as a reputation system, right? You go to talk to an NPC and they don't want to give you directions to Blazar the wizard in the village, right? They are very closed off. They're like, no, we don't trust you. You can attempt to persuade them by basically speaking honeyed words. Hey, I know that you're protective of Blazar, but we really need to find him. It's incredibly important. And maybe that is enough. But just because you successfully roll a 20, it doesn't mean that the villager is going to give you directions to Blazar. They might be very, very, very closed off. Another example of this, again, is the common, the king hands his crown to the bard and lets the bard sleep with the queen. I don't give a fuck how high you roll on persuasion. What could you possibly say to convince the king of a country to give you his crown and let you sleep with his wife? The answer is nothing. The answer is fucking nothing. You're not using command. The spell command, right? You can't even use command to do that. You're not using a spell. You're using your words, your silver tongue, to try to convince people that you are trustworthy. And the biggest one, the one you've all heard before, is, I seduce the dragon. What? Funny, hilarious meme, but you're not convincing a dragon to fuck you with a persuasion roll. That's just not happening. And honestly, if you have a player that's a lot like this, that's like wants to fuck everything in sight, fine. That player ends up getting their entire asshole ripped apart. That's your fucking fault. You wanted to fuck the owlbear, it tore you limb from limb in a sexual rage. Fuck you. Like, I am sick and tired of hearing these stories about, yeah, I didn't want my players to win against the BBEG, but they rolled a high persuasion. What are you talking about? You're telling me that they convinced the almighty Lich to lay down his fucking spells and quit trying to take over the world because they talked a little bit? Is this fucking Naruto? Steven Universe? No, it's Dungeons and Dragons. Now, what persuasion is useful for, it's allowing your players to, like I said, sort of a reputation system. The way to use persuasion is to bolster the player's reputation with the NPCs. So again, if we go back to the villager and they're trying to do it, then yes, they can roll persuasion and they might get a rapport with that villager. But before the villager will give them the directions to Blazar, the wizard, then the villager can give them a little bit of a quest. Like, okay, well, I kind of trust you guys, but before I tell you where Blazar is, maybe you can do something for me. I had another villager borrow my hoe, right? I need it to go back out and farm. They haven't returned it. Go get it for me, right? Something very simple, something easy. So they just go and they go get the hoe and they bring it back. And that is how they get it to Blazar. But they wouldn't have even gotten that quest in the first place if they hadn't have rolled good persuasion. If we go to the king example, they're not going to convince the king to give up his crown and let you fuck his wife. But they might be able to convince the king to toss them a few extra coins. They might be able to convince the king that they are the people that they need in order to get a very important mission done, which could end up landing them things like land or a house or money, or some of the king's concubines, not his wife. You know what I mean? That's how persuasion works. It increases reputation and opens up opportunities. It does not yoink the willpower of the NPC they are talking to. You're not going to be able to seduce the dragon, but you might make the dragon friendly towards you. The dragon might appreciate this little mortal and their funny ha-ha antics and decide not to kill the entire lot of you and instead want you to come back to their house or their horde and see how they live. That is how you use persuasion. So please stop handing me these horror stories about how persuasion was used in order for a player to destroy your entire campaign, because that's not how it works, and you should stop letting it work that way. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know what you think down below, and as always, I appreciate you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one.